Hey, welcome back to Beyond the To-Do List. I am your host, Erik Fisher. If you're listening to this Memorial Day weekend 2024, I hope that you had a great one. Or if you're a regular podcast listener who listens to their favorite shows, which I hope this is for you, right as it downloads, thank you for that also. I'm hoping that you're going to be setting your week up great, and we thought this is perfect. Let's do another mailbag episode for a holiday weekend. And by the way, we've got some great questions for you. You've given some great questions. And if you want to send one in for the next episode, you can go to beyondthetodolist.com/contact, or just go to the show at beyondthetodolist.com and click that contact button up in the top. So without further ado, let's just jump on in. Also, I am joined by my friend, Todd Bashong. Hi, Todd.
Hello. Thanks again for having me.
And he will be handling the questions, the reading of the questions, I say, because it'd be a little pretentious for me to read the questions and then answer the questions. So he will be fulfilling that role. And we had a lot of fun doing it last time. So let's just jump in.
All right. Sounds good. So just to jump right in, like you said, question number 1 comes from Jane A. And Jane asks, I struggle with managing my time effectively, especially with balancing work and personal life. I often find myself working late into the night, which leaves me feeling exhausted the next day. What strategies can I use to ensure I'm being productive during work hours and have enough time to relax and recharge?
This is the eternal struggle, isn't it? That just, again, and we will be referencing this thought or whatever you want to call it. It's Parkinson's law, I believe, where work expands to fill the time that you allow it to. Let's just face it, there's always more work that you could be doing. So part of the problem here is just saying, I'm turning it off now, I'm shutting it off now, I'm putting up boundaries, etc. Like when you're allowing yourself to start in the day, when you're saying there's a line in the sand that I'm done for the day, sometimes you have to negotiate that with the people that be in charge of you, ungrammatically correct. and sometimes that's you. So you've got to make those decisions yourself as well. But I would say the other key piece here is to be able to be the most productive during the work hours. Sometimes you have to do pauses and intervals and say, I'm going to do this for this amount of time. We've talked about Pomodoro method on this show many, many times. That's one method. A string of intervals with breaks where you go back and forth. It's kind of like, you know, you're in the gym and you go do your 10 reps on one machine, you move to a different machine, do 10 there, and you just go round about. And one of those machines, so to speak, metaphorically, is your break time. And so you do those intervals, you do those round robins on all those different machines, and then you take a more fulfilling break. That's what I have to do. I cannot sit at my desk for forever. I have to put my standing desk up. I sometimes have to pull out the treadmill that goes under my desk. Sometimes I have to, depending upon the weather, take the dog for a quick walk, and other times get up and even pace on the phone while I'm on a call. It's differentiating between all of those modes, those modalities, that scenery, that environment.
Yeah.
So
it's interesting that you bring up weather because, you know, one thing I know with us coming into summertime that, you know, really benefits, you know, at least us folks in the Midwest and folks that live in, you know, seasonal environments, that with summertime being here, much more sunlight, a lot easier to be more productive during actual work hours. But at the same time, on the flip side of that coin is they're much more busy with vacations, much, you know, busier with family stuff maybe. So, you know, what are some of the pros and cons that you see, like with the weather changing?
For me, it's easier to get started in the morning. With it being lighter out sooner, admittedly, the first time in a very long time, I got up and I went to the YMCA and I got on a treadmill and listened to some music and then switched over to a podcast and then wound down and went home. And as I was going home, it was getting lighter out and I realized, okay, now I know the perfect time. Get up just as this is starting, giving myself permission to get up later so that right as I'm up and I look outside my windows when I'm up walking around in the house, there's light, and that light starts to trigger. I mean, this is all scientific. I'm not going to dive into the science, but it's true that the light will wake you up the more you see it first thing in the morning, et cetera, more so than coffee. I know people don't believe that, but it's true. I had the coffee when I got home, but yeah. And then it being lighter out later allows you to feel still more awake in the day later as well. So maybe you can crack the laptop again. I know this goes against what I said about boundaries, but at the same time, if you have a designated thing and you say 20 minutes, 30 minutes, that one thing, and then you finish it maybe sooner than that time you'd set for it, boom, and then be done.
Yeah, I just know that I don't feel the dread of that 5 o'clock sunset. Like, it's just like
the 4:30 darkness drops.
Going, oh man, like I actually, can maybe get a little bit done around that 7:30, 8 o'clock hour and still have time to go outside and enjoy that last, little bit of sunlight. So it is refreshing that we are in that time of year. All right, so moving on here, Tom asks, no matter how hard I try, I always end up procrastinating, particularly with tasks that seem overwhelming or boring. I've tried to do to-do lists and setting deadlines, but nothing seems to work. Are there any techniques or tools that I can use to help me stay focused and get tasks done on time without feeling stressed?
It just occurred to me something that I didn't even prep to say here, which is sometimes when you're doing the boring tasks is when you need to play something music or podcast wise that's entertaining and gets your mood up, gets you engaged so that you can sit there and like if it's literally triaging your emails or it's archiving or moving paper, digital paperwork, it's fun to have an album. This is a 40-minute album. I'm going to allow myself to do this thing for this amount of time, and I'm going to have fun doing it, and you just say so. Sometimes it is such a hijacked term, but sometimes you do need to psych yourself into something. You just decide, this is what I'm going to do, and this is how I'm going to do it, and I'm not wrong for doing it that way, and you just do it and get it done.
Yep. So much of my day sometimes is just emails, or I have to go through spreadsheets and just do, a lot of checking off of boxes and, formatting shows, changing them over from different files. It's all just administrative work, and if I can just say, you know what? I'm going to listen to a favorite podcast right now. Maybe it's just a mindless, brainless one that is Marvel or Star Wars show or something that I can listen to in that 45 minutes or an hour. Awesome. It kind of motivates me to just go, all right, I'm going to set this aside and have this fun thing to do while I'm doing it. And, like you said, kind of psychs you out a little bit and helps you get into that mode.
That's where a lot of those celebrities talking to celebrities type podcasts come in for me. It's like, okay, I'm going to listen to, Smartless is, and I love it. Man, their Trevor Noah episode, quick little productivity tip. If you want to get their episode a week early with no commercials, Amazon Music. And Trevor Noah will be out by the time this episode is out. So go listen to it wherever you listen to it. But I really liked that one. It was a really good episode, funny and intelligent. So trying to think if there's anything else I want to throw in here for you, but ultimately it's, again, you want to have those peaks and valleys and plan for them in terms of the time of the day and the day of the week, and manage your energy. And procrastination, honestly, is often about breaking the seal. You want to do something, do anything. Yeah. In fact, I think that has something to do with our next question now that I'm thinking about it.
No, that's for sure. Yeah, our next question here is from Lisa, and Lisa asks, with so many tasks on my to-do list, I often feel overwhelmed and don't know where to start. I end up working on smaller, less important tasks just to feel productive. How can I prioritize my tasks to make sure I'm working on the most important things fast and not just what feels urgent?
Yeah, so this is what I was saying. In the Eisenhower matrix, the urgent, important, 4 boxes. You can picture that in your head. Urgent, not important. I won't go through the rest because that's redundant. But yeah, the thing is sometimes you have to do the unimportant stuff to, again, like I said, break the seal. You've got to do something to feel like you can do anything. Often, sometimes you've got to send that one email to feel like you can send, okay, I've got like 20 emails I've got to send today. You got to just sit down and send one, or you got to make call. My wife I'm not throwing her under the bus. She hates to do it, but sometimes it's just, okay, I got to make that one call and then I've got to make all these other calls, or I got to pay this one bill. So I'm going to pay all the bills. And it just takes a little bit of getting used to. It's kind of like, oh my gosh, there's so many dishes. Well, you do one of them, or actually you're batch processing them, really. Yeah. It's funny that we don't think of it that way, batch processing the dishes. But it really comes down to, yes, there's definitely a hierarchy. There's definitely a time and a place for prioritization. Honestly, one of the things that you can do to prioritize is to prioritize those admin tasks as a chunk of time. And this goes back to, pull out the podcast, pull out the music, whatever, and or get out of the house. Like sometimes it's go to a coffee shop and reward yourself with a coffee while you're sitting there and doing the admin tasks in the mid-afternoon. That's a physical, psychological, and environmental pick-me-up. and helps you get stuff done, as long as you identify that and block it out and go do it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of 2-minute tasks that you can do.
Yeah, for sure.
In an hour, you know?
And I think a lot of people struggle with exactly what Lisa's saying here, with the difference between important and urgent, because everything feels urgent. And frankly, everything's not urgent. So it's taking the time to actually look at the tasks and be able to delineate between what really, is important and urgent. Again, the Eisenhower matrix there and everything. If you want to know more, just look that up. But it is a good tool for being able to differentiate between those two. But, a lot of times it's just good, disciplined, workday planning is just going, what really is the most urgent task that really needs to be addressed right now? Almost tiering important tasks, to, okay, that's pressing, but not ultimately pressing, being able to put those in different baskets. But I know that can be tough, because everything does feel overwhelming, but it is just a matter of sometimes taking that deep breath and having, better realization about what is pressing.
One thing you could do is maybe if you're working through a to-do list, is to prioritize tasks and then check that off as the thing you do to feel like you've been productive, because then you've organized and arranged the Venn diagram of urgent and important, and then and then you can switch over to the most important and or the most urgent first. I mean, sometimes it's like, oh, I can't figure out what I'm supposed to do yet. Well, then sit down and do that. And I know that's the medicine. And honestly, another thing, do it the night before. Part of your shutdown routine. Before you shut who shuts their computer down? Long ago, when I was in a cubicle, this was actually something I did, was I would make my list for future Erik to walk into the next morning, and I would have it there. Then I would shut my big clunky Dell computer off, and I would walk out the door and I'd leave work at work. And then when I walked in, everything was already arranged in terms of urgent and important. So try that. Yeah.
For me, sometimes, as a podcast editor, it's just as simple as saying, you know what, this is what I've got to do tomorrow. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually download that show. I'm going to format it correctly. I'm going to actually bring it up in my editing software so that in the morning when I wake up, it's just there and it's ready to go. And I don't have to do the little admin, steps of getting started, because so much of work is just doing the little steps to just get going. Once you get started, then you find the momentum.
You're removing the inertia of the, air quotes, heavy lifting of digital files to actually start doing the thing.
Exactly.
Love it.
Exactly. All right, so moving on here, Mark Davis asks, I spend a lot of time in unproductive meetings that feel like a waste of time. It's frustrating when we don't achieve much during these sessions. How can I make sure that these meetings I attend or organize are more efficient and time efficient, and that we can actually accomplish something?
Well, this is the bane of everybody's existence, right? Meetings. Let's say bad meetings instead, because there are good meetings. Oh, don't you love it when a good meeting happens? Like, we have a meeting, we get something done, and it wasn't longer than it needed to be. But how does that happen? So I think it's pre, during, and post. I think it comes down to, 1, why are we having the meeting? Does this meeting need to even happen? 2, who needs to be there? 3, what does everybody need to bring to the meeting? Is there pre-work? Is there, hey, you already have to have looked this over and come with your ideas? And then during the meeting, it's a matter of, well, what's the purpose of the meeting? Are we here to make a decision, or are we here to go over whatever all the options everybody brought? Are we reviewing things? Are we coming up with next steps? I mean, everybody should have that agenda walking in and know what's expected of them. And then I think there's probably more to that during the meeting time, but roundabout going again, work expanding to fill the time allotted for it. Same rule applies to meetings. If you say it's an hour and it doesn't need to be an hour, you're wasting time. I know I hate to say this, but try setting all those 1 hour meetings for half an hour and see how fast you actually still get the same amount of meeting stuff done in that half hour. And then post meeting, it's send out, before you, well, I guess it's kind of still during the meeting, make sure all the assignments have been given. The delegation is what I mean. Somebody's kept notes during it, and that's easier now than ever with transcription and recordings. Check out my link in the show notes for Cast Magic. And then post meeting, it's send out the review, send out the notes, and then send out the assignments. And then, like I said, send out all the assignments. And then, post meeting, it's send out the assignments, and then post meeting, it's send out the assignments, and then post meeting, it's send out the review, send out the notes, send out the link to the recording, the summary, all that kind of good stuff, and make sure that anybody who maybe wasn't there especially gets tagged so that they see what they missed, what's expected of them, and all the things that were delegated to them since they weren't there.
That's all like really good advice. And like you said, with, transcription software, the way that it is, I know that there's a tool, unfortunately, it doesn't come to mind now, but that will actually transcribe your Zoom meeting, and it will actually, make specific bullet points of action items that you're actually discussing and what, needs to get done. So, I can actually look that up and, leave a note in the show notes. I'll remind myself to do that. So there's a lot of that, so the technology is great, but also it does just boil down to, good old fashioned awareness of what are the goals of this meeting, and can we break down the time a little bit more efficiently, and can we actually eliminate some of the, I don't want to call it unnecessary socializing, but, just a little bit of the, hey, we can talk a little bit afterwards, but let's, be focused while we're in the meeting about what we're trying to achieve here. All right, so moving on here, Sarah Miller asks, I work in a noisy office environment and find it hard to concentrate with all the background noise and interruptions. I've tried using noise-canceling headphones, but it's not always enough. What are some other ways to minimize distractions and maintain focus on my work, especially when I need to complete tasks that require deep concentration?
Well, first off, kudos to you for the noise canceling headphones. And I would say, since I don't know, what are you using? Are you using like in-ear noise canceling? Because if so, I mean, those can be great, but over the ear would add a little extra buffer or boundary and kind of gives you, even with in-ear, this is true, but because you can't wear headphones for forever and not feel like they're hurting your, even the most comfortable headphone will wear on you over time.
Yeah. And it's person to person as to whether or not you prefer the in-ear or over the ear. For myself personally, over the ear is better over longer stretches of time, but you're right. It does a little better job of buffering that, you got a physical
noise block, and then the added technology of microphones and speakers, et cetera, for noise canceling. Sony, from my experience, Sony has the best when it comes to, now I have tried the AirPods Max, I believe is they're called. Yeah. Those are great for home and pairing with like an Apple TV or.
They're amazing, but you got to take a second mortgage out for them.
Although I will say I've seen on like scrolling Facebook Marketplace productively, I have seen pairs of them that are sealed and hopefully not bootleg for like 190. I mean, that's less than half. But for that same amount of money, you can get a great new pair of Sonys that are noise canceling that are as good, if not better. And those are great. So that's noise canceling headphones. Then the second part of this, noisy office environment. 1, can you get out of the building? If yes, do so. Go somewhere else. Go home if you can, if that's an option. Go to a library where the rule is quiet. So there you go. And or go to somewhere, maybe it's less noisy, but it's a public park. And, middle of the day, there's not, there's kids aren't out there, depending, might be summer. And then if you're stuck in the building and it's a no-go to get out of the building, find places you can go. Conference rooms you can book. Sometimes you can even lobby for so there's some of these like pod things that it's like a phone booth. It's like a phone booth with sound noise cancellation stuff built into it where you can sit and take Zoom calls. An office I used to work at had these and I loved it. Couldn't hear what was going on outside, which sometimes that was awkward because they'd walk by and be like, and peek and stuff. But anyway, I enjoy having those kinds of coworkers. But yeah, having those kinds of options. So it's change your personal environment in your head with the headphones. And 2, change your exterior environment, either immediate or as far away as you can, but just knowing what your options are. You may not have thought through all the possibilities and options.
Sure. Another tip that I would have for Sarah here is I used to work in an office that was, around 125, 140 folks in just one gigantic open space. And, what sometimes can be key is to signal to your fellow employees that I am in a deep work, environment right here. We had a few coders who literally had little flags that they would raise up a little flagpole, that just said, hey, I am, in concentration mode right now. Please don't come up and just try to socialize with me unless it's an emergency. Like, don't, bother me right now. I know that can sound a little bit off-putting, but your coworkers get used to it and you just go, oh, okay, cool. Sarah's working right now. She's in deep focus and doesn't want to be bothered. Because let's face it, a lot of times it's not that our bosses or our managers are coming to us about work stuff. It's that our colleagues, and friends at work want to come and talk about the movie that they saw over the weekend or want to talk about sports or whatever it might be. And you get distracted with that and, it becomes a whole nother rabbit trail that you go down. So just signaling that I'm in deep work and getting into that habit can be a helpful way to, keep your concentration. So Alex Martinez writes, I set goals for myself, but often fail to achieve them, either because I set them too high or lose motivation along the way. What are some methods to set realistic and achievable goals, and how can I track my progress effectively to stay motivated and on track?
It's funny because for a work thing, I was doing kind of a live Facebook thing with somebody earlier today, and he said something and it made me think of this question. And he basically said, a lot of times people just don't think to look forward enough and this is more of a broader thing. They don't think to look forward enough in their life and say, where do I want to be? How do I want to be? Who do I want to be by a certain point in time, and then reverse engineer to the current time and say, what is the minimal consistent thing that I could do that would start to enable that to be inevitable? And so, for example, if I want to be healthier, okay, can I do one push-up every day for a week and then double it and then double it and then double it, and doubling, I don't know that you double it over and over and over, that at some point you do that doubling switches to a point where it's an impossible thing, but you get what I'm saying. It's bricklaying. It's like brick by brick by brick to get somewhere. And that may be, Alex may be thinking, well, that's too low or not motivating enough. But I think that starting with that even keel and just gradually dialing it up, you get to a point where you, one, see the progress, and two, feel like it's something that can continue to motivate you. I'm trying to think of what else here. I mean, motivation is tricky. I would say, as we were talking about seasonality, I don't try to start new things in the darker times of the year. That is just an uphill battle. I would rather, ironically, I'd rather be sledding or sliding down easier into new habits during times when it's warm out and more sun out and more light out, etc. That makes it a whole lot easier for me. Like, for example, I said I went to the gym for the first time in months. It's because the light was out. And now I was like, I didn't do it today, confession, but that's because I knew today I couldn't, but I did it the other day as an experiment to kind of test out the light. So now that I have that data, I can make a more informed decision.
Yeah, for sure. Like, so setting, more realistic goals. Like sometimes we set unrealistic goals when we're feeling really great. Like it is those times and it's going, okay, like, maybe when I'm feeling, really great and really motivated, that's when I need to actually set those smaller goals. Like instead of the unrealistic ones, I want to go, you know what? I feel like now is the time to set this big go-getter goal, and it's going, no, actually, let's find a more realistic, achievable goal, to set. And then, again, start from that baseline and go from there. It's just like with diet, with exercise, with anything. It's just starting with those small steps. And I know that sounds incredibly simplistic, but it really is, the way to do it.
So I will actually, so here's another confessional piece. What I did 2 nights in a row now, and I'm feeling very proud of this, and it's very motivational, is I had a cutoff of, so I've had success. I've had success with intermittent fasting for my health in the past. However, it was always okay, I'm not eating until 11 or 12 in the day, other than maybe some coffee and definitely some water. And then I would have lunch and I would have dinner, and then I'd have snacks in the evening, and then whatever. I decided to flip it because I know this is healthy. The increment that I changed was, I'm going to eat breakfast first thing when it's happening, but I'm fasting in the evening my cutoff is now 8:00, and I'm not saying I'm cramming stuff in right before 8:00. I'm like, I've had dinner. I even let myself have a small piece of pie that was in the fridge, but that was 7. And then it got to be 8:00, and I was like, okay, I'm done. And I felt great. I've actually felt more energy these past few days because of that, and it's because I've shifted that. So,
yep. And again, just
try it.
Small little shifts. So, all right. So Emily writes, as a parent working from home, it's challenging to separate work time from family time. I often feel guilty for not spending enough time with my kids or not being productive enough at work. What are some tips to create a better work-life balance and stay productive without feeling overwhelmed by guilt?
Okay, we're going to deal with the guilt thing last. But before we get there, preface this with saying there's a lot of potential context here that changes the answer. Depends on how old the kids are. Depends on how much you need to be involved with them. Depends on, I mean, if they're, as I often hear people refer to them, if you got littles, then you have little, like you have to be present. Like that's what it's about.
Depends on your situation with your spouse or life partner.
Yep. Friends, family, your living situation is going to dictate a lot of what your options are here. That said, kids are more resilient, and I know that, okay, this kind of starts to touch into the guilt stuff. They are more resilient. They can be much more of a surprise than we think they are. That said, I did have a guest at some point on the show, this was years ago, and they told me that in the research, she found that, and this was just not just her research, it was research by like scientists, social scientists even, that kids were okay. And this is not some long-term thing, but it also applies to like spouses and family and friends, that it's not that you need to have these big honking chunks of quality time. Like some people say, oh man, we've got to sit down all at the table every night for an hour. And then when they don't achieve that, they feel guilt. It's actually the minimum viable dose. And what that came down to was maybe 10, 15-minute connection time, seeing, hearing, understanding connection in the morning, and then also early evening. Mm-hmm. And if you can get those, the kids are okay.
Yeah. And obviously it's difficult, like, because, when you're working at home, they're right there, on the other side of the door a lot, of times. And so that, quote unquote guilt, that feeling of, oh, they're right there, I should, be there, is much more intense than if you're at the office. But again, going back to a little bit of the social science and studies, kids actually thrive on routine, almost above everything else. And if you can be firm, and stay strong, and these are some of my office hours, and you're just not able to interrupt mom or dad, during this time, they will adjust to that. Like, it seems a little harsh. It's almost like when kids cry themselves to sleep, a little bit, and you just feel like, I'm a terrible parent. Like, I should not be doing this. But sometimes that boundary has to be laid, and then kids will adjust because, like you said, they're much more malleable, and they're much, more flexible than sometimes we give them credit for.
They can be taught.
They can.
And another piece that this kind of goes back to some of the questions from earlier is, if they have homework time and you have homework time from work, you can all sit down together, and they're working on their homework, and they see you. Mom's got her homework time too. Okay. And then you're still, even if you're not doing air quotes quality time, your presence is there, though. The presence is happening.
Absolutely. I know I've seen you do that with your son at coffee shops. We have a mutual friend who a lot of times will go to a big Chinese buffet, and they'll just go and he'll do his homework, and our friend will he's a professor, so we'll grade papers or whatever. And it's just a fun experience to go out together, and have quality time in silence together while you achieve things. So there are definitely a lot of different tips and tricks that you can employ to pull that off. But I do know that, that is tough. So, all right. So moving on here, Rachel Taylor asks, I often find myself lacking motivation, especially during long projects that seem to drag on forever. What can I do to stay motivated and maintain a high level of productivity throughout the project, even when the initial excitement wears off?
Yeah. I mean, the creative part, the dreaming it up part, the planning it part, all that kind of, the front end, it's like, hey, we're starting this we're kicking it off and, we're kickstarting it and all this kind of good stuff. That can be fun. That can be exciting. That carries an emotional component to it that can give you momentum to start and momentum to go for a while. The issue is that wears off if you don't foster it. And so I'm thinking, what are ways that you can do that? And one of the things is, again, kind of alluded to this earlier, where projects have goals and milestones. Our goal is to complete the project on time by this timeline, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, well, what are the components of that? And now you reverse engineer that. Is it the end of this quarter? Is it, is this a next quarter thing we're starting now? Is it, knowing some of that stuff, doing some of that homework? Again, that's going to be part of the excitement. Some of this sounds exciting to some people. Others are like, ugh, this is horrible. But breaking it down, reverse engineering it, creating actual or even artificial deadlines, milestones to check off, and having rewards for hitting certain points in time. You crossed it. Hey, we crossed the line on this thing. Yay. We do a pizza party. I'm sounding so like corporate at this point, and or college. But yeah, that has a lot to do with it. It's again, it's psychological and or artificial deadlines. Kids' routines. So do we as adults need them. Yeah.
So this is kind of maybe a strange metaphor, but I spend a lot of time thinking about movies, listening to shows about movies. It's a big, kind of part of my sort of daily habits. And, I work in a creative space, as an editor. And it's been interesting when I hear various movie directors talk about their film, and they think about, in those initial planning processes, it's so exciting because, you're just getting the script and you're talking about the production design and, this is what it's going to look like, it's all so super, super exciting. But then you get in to the actual, what can be drudgery of the day-to-day activity of shooting, a film, or in the financial, aspect of planning that. And, some people don't realize, like, shooting a film sometimes can take, the actual shooting process is maybe only 60 to 90 days, but the actual, process of planning and post-production and everything could be 4 years of your life. So I've heard a lot of directors say, it's actually the editing part is my favorite, or some, it's the shooting part, but all of them agree that it's reaching those milestones along each part of the process, that is super key. So this is why, you have, wrap party for when the cast is done. That's why you celebrate, first day of being in the editing bay. It's breaking that project down, and always with the end, using this metaphor, with the end picture in mind. It's the, that is the end goal in mind, to stay motivated for, like, when this will all be, completed. And I know, whether it is, creative work or, any type of work, that can be very, very frustrating sometimes to, stay motivated with that. But yeah, having those little celebrations and those goalposts that you can set, and to celebrate those little victories, always, in mind with what that end goal eventually, is going to be. All right, so our final question actually of the mailbag here comes from Chris Harris, and Chris asks, I know taking care of your mental and physical health can boost productivity, but I'm not sure where to start. What are some practical self-care tips that can help me stay productive? I'm looking for simple, everyday habits that I can incorporate into my routine to improve my overall well-being and work performance.
Setting a bedtime and sticking to it, that's hard. It's hard for me, and especially when I've got other people in the house and I'm fighting, so to speak, to get everybody to move towards the winding down phase and then the being down phase. One thing I've found that helps with that is to have external Amazon speaker voice devices that call out the time is 8 p.m. and the time is 8:30 p.m. so that, you lose, we lose track of time. And so we suddenly are like, oh crap, it's like 9:30. What are you still doing up? Because we all got wrapped up in our own stuff. Well, having 8 o'clock and 8:30, and those designate different specific types of, hey, that's 8 o'clock is the warning. 8:30 is the 8 o'clock's the warning, and it allows you to decide, okay, what else am I going to do for this next half an hour? 8:30 then is the cutoff. Those will definitely adjust with either what's expectation and or what happens at those now that it's going to be light out and people aren't going to be going to school the next day, but still want to maintain healthy routines. So I would say sticking to a bedtime. I would also say, and they actually say that this is more important, get up at the same time every day. That's actually more important. And you'll find that even if you have a not so great night of sleep, maintaining that routine keeps you more consistent. It sounds strange to say that, but I have actually, honestly, in my experience, found that to be true. And sticking with the sleep, find a way to take a nap. And even if it's not a full-blown 45 minutes, take 15 to 20. Shut your eyes. I did that earlier today. I snuck it in and was able to make it happen. And it made all the difference.
Two aspects for me, and just, let's look at this. It's two aspects of your diet. One being your actual, what you're going to eat meal plan. If you can meal plan and plan ahead, like as to what you're going to eat for a given week, it takes a little bit of the mental stress, off of, oh no, like what am I, going to eat now? Like, also helps you plan, healthier meals and stay on track. If you're trying to, follow a strict diet, if you can meal plan and even like meal prep and have, those meals ready, they're in the freezer, ready to go, and quickly prep is huge. Another aspect of diet, media diet planning. Okay, I am going to decide, okay, this is what I am watching in this given week, or this is what I am going to, consume once I do finish work, so that I don't find myself on Netflix or, on HBO until midnight. Like, these are, the things that I'm going to allot, and that will, again, ensure that I'm in bed when I plan to be in bed, and I'm not just, binging into the wee hours of the night.
Yeah, those are very helpful for sure. And then let's just go into physical activity a little bit here too. We've talked about, getting out, getting steps in, varying your environment. And so whether that's you're in, go out, if you're out, go in. It's funny enough. We're
laughing now because my dog actually just, jumped up on the.
He just got up and moved
chair,
to
and that actually, is an aspect of getting up and moving.
Yeah,
my dog keeps me accountable to that. So that's something, that definitely, helps me, is that I know that I'm getting my steps in every day because he needs his steps. So
yeah. Well, and so let me throw this out there. One of the things that I've been inching towards it again is first thing in the morning, not turning on a screen, and instead getting out into light. And instead of having coffee first, having water first. So drinking water, going out, having a walk, ideally with one of the dogs. The other, I'm never taking both dogs because I can't do that. The one doesn't like me or likes me for food only. But anyways, conditional love. You got to love it. But that's been my change there as well. And I'm hoping to kind of drill that habit down deeper and figure out a way to accommodate it better when it comes to the darker times of the year, light wise and season wise. So
yeah, for sure. Well, as we do enter, officially the start of summer here, hopefully, implementing some of those, good habits will be good as we, celebrate this Memorial Day today. And Eric, thanks so much, for being available to answer these questions, and hope everyone does have a great holiday. We look forward to doing this again. Obviously, we try to do this pretty much every quarter, but again, if you do have questions, just at beyondthetodolist.com, you can submit those and get your questions in for the next time that we have a mailbag. And Eric, again, thank you.
Yeah.
And we will see you next episode.